sharp 6 o'clock. We are now coming for the event which you are all eagerly be awaiting. That is the future of drones in India, threats, operations, and national capabilities. And you all know when I had a brief chat with Air Marshal Matheswaran, when we discussed about this, he said, why can't we do this? It's a very, very interesting session, and a lot of people are looking forward to this session. Now, Air Marshal Matheswaran, the format of the program, he will introduce the speakers and also set the context. Before that, I'll have the, let me warmly welcome all the speakers who are there. Air Marshal Matheswaran, Professor Soundar Rajan, Air Marshal Varthaman, Abhishek Jain, Air Marshal Suresh, former CNC Western Air Command, Sai Pattabhiraman, and Group Captain Augustine, and Wing Commander David Devasagayam. And they will all be introduced in detail by Air Marshal Matheswaran. Now, let me have the privilege of now welcoming Peter Rimmele. Peter Rimmele is the resident representative of India, and let me briefly introduce him before I request him to deliver the introductory remarks. Peter Rimmele is currently the resident representative I mentioned to India, Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. He has the first law degree as well as second law degree from the Ministry of Justice. On behalf of German Foreign Ministry, he served in East Timor Registry General, and he also served over 7 years governance reform of GIZ, German International Cooperation, and Anti-Corruption Commission of Republic of Indonesia. Then he moved on to Rwanda as the principal advisor, Good Governance, Justice and Program. He is presently the resident representative to Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, and he has been a great supporter of MMA. We do a lot of activities relevant to the fundamental objective of a cause. And over to you, Mr. Peter Rimmele, to deliver the introductory remarks. Mr. Peter Rimmele.
You, Group Captain. First of all, I would like to sincerely thank you, Group Captain Vijay Kumar and Air Marshal Matheswaran, for having brought together such a panel of distinguished experts that will undoubtedly provide us with valuable insights and perspectives on the future of drones in India and beyond. So it is already a smart event in the smart city of Chennai. Looking at the title, The Future of Drones in India, I wasn't sure, is it the future of drones in India or the future drones in India? Maybe both is correct, and we will discuss it. Ladies and gentlemen, drones are at the present and the future of warfare. There is no fooling ourselves, and any nation that would shut its eyes like the proverbial ostrich to this new technology would undoubtedly find itself unable to compete militarily with nations that are heavily invested in this new technology. An instance just out of the recent past may explain my conviction that can be found in the recently concluded war between Armenia and Azerbaijan, marking the first in modern warfare to be won almost entirely by the strength of drones. Armenia, which fought with tanks, artillery, and air defense systems, so the concept of boots on the ground, was resoundingly deleted and defeated by Azerbaijan, which relied to a great extent on drones, such as the heavy and expensive Turkish-made Bayraktar TB2 and the Israeli-made kamikaze drones. However, this example represents only a tiny fraction of the bigger picture, as drone technology is evolving rapidly, thereby carrying along several wide-ranging consequences, some economic, some strategic, some benign, and some not so innocuous. Now, let's look at the whole picture. Today, we will look more at the military side of it, more at the defense side of it. But if we look at drones and the future, we also have to look into the civilian possibilities and what can it bring for the benefit of mankind. I know that many things are discussed in the transportation sector. One thing might even affect India. A decision in Germany I read about in the newspaper 2 days ago, that the German postal services has now stopped its development program of delivering parcels with drones. They were working on that. Why could it affect India? One of the biggest daughters of the German postal service is DHL. And that one is operating in India as well. So currently there's a stop on such developments. So we should also keep in mind the civilian possibilities. Drones already today exist in small sizes. They are easy to conceal, can be deployed quickly and in large numbers, and are difficult to track. They're also comparatively cheap and unlike other advanced weaponry, are not exclusively limited to military superpowers with huge defense budgets. Instead, any country could afford them in a large number, and even, and that's the danger, non-state actors could buy them, as we have seen in the recent past. For as little as a few €100, decent drones can be acquired, which could be weaponized with a warhead that delivers precision strikes, which in the past used to require multi-million euro aircrafts with guidance system or huge and expensive cruise missiles. A nation can easily buy several hundred or even thousands of these drones, since, for instance, 20 to 30 quadcopters cost as much as the equipment of a single US soldier, which stands currently at around $17,000. This low cost and easy accessibility poses a disquieting danger, as they could fall into the wrong hands of non-state actors, such as terrorist groups, who could use them to carry out terrorist attacks on civilians. Such a scenario becomes all the more worrisome, since a swarm of tiny drones simultaneously directed at a specific target poses a massive problem for conventional air defense systems. I spare myself the technicalities on that. We have too many experts who are much better on that. Therefore, the further development of such defense technology will be of the utmost importance in the future for the safety, security, and protection of civil population and the defense of the territorial sovereignty of nations. Moreover, international multilateral agreements on the availability of drone parts and regulations concerning their sale are of utmost importance to further mitigate such dangers. Let me conclude. Given the title of today's webinar, please allow me to make a brief comment on the Indian situation as an external observer. Given that both India's eastern and western neighbors have access to drones, and China has even reached US standards with the CH-4, CH-5 drones, as well as the fact that Turkey and Pakistan are moving towards closer alliance, India's investment in such technologies appears mandatory. As the resident representative of CAS India office, a foundation that works tirelessly for peace, prosperity, and security throughout the world, it is of course rather unpleasant to talk about such a military buildup. However, it is essential to remain realistic about the dangers that both countries could pose to the entire Indo-Pacific region at large and avoid underestimating them. Therefore, it seems inevitable to equip India's military with the latest drone and anti-drone technologies, precisely to preserve and uphold the principles I have just described, and thereby meet the challenges to the rule of law. For as Albert Einstein once said, the world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who watch them without doing anything. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Peter, for the insightful opening remarks that set the context. And now I will request Air Marshal Matheswaran. Before I'll request him to formally introduce other speakers and also set the context, let me have the privilege of introducing Air Marshal Matheswaran. Air Marshal Matheswaran is an Air Force veteran, over 39 years of service, and he's a founder president of Peninsula Foundation, which does some policy research, a think tank based in Chennai. And he's an alumnus of IAF prestigious institutions like AST, TACD, and he's also the commandant and deputy commandant of the respective organizations. Air Marshal is a recipient of President Award AVSM and also VM and commendation by the Chief of the Air Staff. And also to tell you the profile of all the speakers have already been circulated to you in detail along with the invitation card. Now I will request Air Marshal Matheswaran to set the context. Thank you once again, Peter, for joining us from Germany, and also Pankaj joining us this evening. Good to see you. Over to you, Air Marshal Matheswaran.
Thank you, Vijay. Thank you, Peter, for this wonderful initial address. I think you set the tone extremely well. And so let me welcome the panelists and welcome all the audience. The topic is extremely interesting, and we are looking at it from the context of India, particularly the future of drones in India. And in three angles, we are looking at threats, operations, and national capabilities. And I would want to put that in the correct perspective. The importance of the topic and the interest it's generated is well indicated by we have nearly 110 participants who are now watching the show directly on the Zoom. It's very, very interesting to see that. Well, from a threat perspective, the world has come a long way, as Peter has indicated. The drones began to arrive sometime almost 3 decades ago, and much of the focus have been on the larger birds like Predator and the global hawk. But I must tell you, when I did my PhD with the Madras University, and my topic was on the aerospace power, and here was a document that I studied closely. The US Air Force initiated a study called Air Force 2025 in 1995. And the primary objective was, there were 2 points that are made. One was that the technology is now enabling others to catch up and close the gap to the US. And the future threats in air and space is going to be significant, and find ways and means of how to actually expand this gap between others and the US. That is a fundamental issue. The document came out in 1996 as Air Force 2025. And one of the most interesting aspects of that was in the domain of drones. So in 95-96, they had actually recommended creation of a global information system, which is now already in existence, and integrating and networking from the smallest drone of a bumblebee size to the largest one of global hawk, all networked and integrated in terms of constantly creating a 24/7 real-time information flow, for the US forces. Well, they also spoke about smaller drones moving into domains of air warfare, and of course, an ability to actually bring about precision attacks. 30 years down the line, this is the reality. The Azerbaijan-Armenia war has clearly indicated what these smaller drones can do. And of course, the attacks by Houthi rebels, the Yemeni rebels, on the Aramco refinery year before last, and of course, the continued attacks that happen in the Middle East using these drones. So the drones are changing the way the warfare is going to take shape. And 2 primary factors contribute to that. One, easy availability of smaller drones. While the focus is on the bigger drones are being on the ISR, the smaller drones are now, and the ability to bring in very highly evolved explosives, plastic explosives in smaller sizes to create precise effects. The smaller drones are giving tremendous opportunities. The lower cost makes it available for non-state actors to be able to level the playing field against governments and established militaries. And therefore, in the hands of non-state actors, it becomes a very potent threat for future nation states. So in terms of warfare, it may change because the concept of having highly technologically intensive and very capital intensive, expensive military weapon systems may get neutralized by these inexpensive, drones, which can change the way the battlefields are monitored, conducted, and warfare conducted. So the changes in the operations will have to be viewed in the context of the emerging threat with these smaller drones and integration of technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, and of course the swarming. Swarming was mentioned in the 1996 document that I mentioned about earlier. And swarming today is operationalized completely. So the attacks that have taken place, for example, in the Russian airbase, in 2018, which was 13 smaller drones that rolled into attack. They were actually launched by the ISIS, and then damaged a couple of aircraft, were actually the potent, symbol of the way the drone threats can actually, contribute to the future of warfare. In terms of threats and operations, India needs to factor this. How do you counter the emerging threat of smaller drones? Is a very, very important aspect that we need to look at. On the other hand, in terms of national capabilities, the development of drone technology has offered a wide spectrum of opportunities and capabilities that can be exploited on the civil domain. And therefore, how are you going to balance the need for developing technologies, capabilities, and balance the security angle in the context of threat is going to be a challenge in the context of or policy making. The new draft rules have been already opened out for the last 1 month. And I think balancing the two is important. That's where our panelists who represent the industries will also talk about. Developing critical technologies, whether it's algorithms, or whether it's artificial intelligence or the autopilots, will be very, very important for us to be able to hold the key in the future. So with this overview, let me now leave the field for the panelists, the very distinguished panel that we have. Let me welcome the chairperson of the panel for today, Air Marshal S. Varthaman, and a distinguished Air Force fighter pilot. He's had an excellent career of more than 40 years, and he's the former Air Officer Commanding in Chief of Eastern Air Command, the primary command that actually is pitted against the Chinese theater. He's also been the Senior Air Staff Officer of Central Air Command, which is again, the primary area of, high-tech weapons and drones that we operate in. As well, the Air Marshal has been highly involved in the acquisition process. He's been the ACS plans, and therefore he's very well versed with the entire acquisition mechanism and the modernization process of the Indian Air Force. He's an experimental test pilot. He's a qualified flying instructor, and he's been the chief test pilot of AST, which is a premier flight test agency for India. And he's also done a tenure as the air attaché in Paris for 3 years, and therefore internationally is extremely, well exposed to the policies and the national, international relations aspect of it. I must also highlight here that the Air Marshal and I are also schoolmates. We are from the same school as well. So, Vartha sir, welcome to the panel as the chairperson. Let me introduce the other panelists for you so that you can take over and move on with the subject. Air Marshal Suresh, Balakrishna Suresh, has had a distinguished career of nearly 40 years. He retired as the C-in-C of Western Air Command, the primary operational command of the Indian Air Force. And he's again had a fabulous career, and he's been my colleague also in the Top Gun School of the Indian Air Force, which is TAC-D. The Air Marshal is a fighter pilot again, and primarily on MiG-27s, but he's flown all the other types as well. He's commanded the Top Gun School TAC-D, which I mentioned earlier. He's also been in a very important command and staff appointments. He's been the ACS Ops, Air Defense. He's also been the DG Ops for operations. And therefore, he's in an extremely good position to give an overview of the operational national security perspective in the context of drones. And he's also been involved in the context of, planning for the modernization part of air defense weapons as well as the drones, etc. Both Air Marshal Varthaman and Air Marshal Suresh are recipients of presidential awards. Air Marshal Varthaman has been awarded with PVSM, AVSM, VM, and VSM. And Air Marshal Suresh is also a recipient of the awards of PVSM, AVSM, and VM. And Suresh, I welcome you onto the panel again, once again. The third panelist we have is Group Captain Augustine, a fighter pilot, and he's also been with us in Eastern Air Command. He's flown the Mirage 2000s and MiG-29s. After having served for nearly 3 decades in the Indian Air Force, he's taken a voluntary retirement, moved out to pursue his passion on entrepreneurship. He runs his own drone company, Automicro UAS, and I think is now already very well known across the industry as well as in the national scene with respect to development of small and medium, small and micro UAVs. Augustine is also a recipient of the Visage Seva Medal, and he's got about 3,000 hours on Mirage 2000, MiG-21, and Kiran aircraft. A combination of operational experience and being able to actually handle the drones is an important element in understanding the nuances of drone strategies and drone operations. So Augustine, welcome to the panel. Let me now go on to Professor Soundar Rajan, a distinguished scientist from DRDO. He's the former director of DARE, the it's a laboratory, the Defense Avionics and Research Establishment. And he's been instrumental in some of the most important projects for the Air Force on MiG-27 upgrade, as well as Su-30 MKI. So he's been the brain behind the mission computers on the Su-30 and the entire avionics upgrade of the MiG-27. There were tremendous achievements as far as Air Force and DRDO is concerned. Professor Soundar Rajan is a recipient of the Agni Award and for excellence in self-reliance in 2003, and also the Performance Excellence Award for 2008 from DRDO. He is currently a visiting professor at NIAS, Bangalore, and he works with the International Strategic and Security Studies program in NIAS. Let me come to Wing Commander David Devasahayam. Okay, Abhishek is there. Okay, I'll cover Abhishek. Okay, so Abhishek, I welcome to the panel as well. He is the Vice President of Zeus Numerics, Pune. Abhishek is a Master's MTech graduate from IIT Mumbai with a specialization in computational fluid dynamics. He is a very well-recognized innovator. He's one of the 10 innovators to meet Defense Secretary USA on his visit. He's a winner of Lockheed Martin's Innovation Medal. Abhishek contributes immensely to some of the Air Force's upgrade and development programs, and he's an important member of FICCI and SIDM and contributes immensely to the innovation and the indigenous capability developments in the country. Zeus Numerics has worked to develop an indigenous autopilot, and Abhishek will probably cover that part when we come to the panel. Let me cover Mr. Sai Pattabhiraman. He is the MD of Zupa Geo Navigation, a startup that is now reaching places all over, particularly in the geo navigation and as well as survey areas in civil drone business areas. Sai is an entrepreneur focused on innovation, and he's also been recognized as one of the most outstanding innovative leaders for MSMEs. His applications are well recognized on the civil drone application domains, and I think he's also expanding into the defense sector gradually. He's also he along with his son has worked to develop an indigenous autopilot, which again he will probably cover when he talks about it. But more importantly, Sai has been quite active in discussing and advising and commenting on various policy issues. And I've been seeing that quite regularly on the IDAT as well as on the LinkedIn websites. Welcome, Sai, on board. Great pleasure to have you on board with us. Let me come to Wing Commander David Devasahayam. He's the first external pilot for drones in the Indian Air Force, involved with the Heron induction and operationalization of Herons, and extremely experienced with the operations of Searchers and Heron UAVs in the Indian military, both Air Force and the Army. He's also carried out a lot of operational trials in Ladakh with respect to both the violent service, and now he's with SAND as their Chief Operational Advisor. He's also been part of the team advising the Home Ministry on dealing with the Maoist problem in Jharkhand. And again, I'm sure he'll talk about it, because the use of bringing exploiting the drones in that context has been a slow process, and I think it would be nice to hear from him on these areas. So welcome on board, David. It's great to have you with us on this panel. Varthaman sir, it's now over to you. You can take on and then can conduct the panel discussions.
Thank you, Matsi. At the outset, thank you, Marshal Matheswaran and Groupie Vijay Kumar, Mr. Peter Rimmele, for inviting me to chair this very interesting session. It's my privilege and honor. Thank you very much. I also pay my respects to Air Marshal Noha, the seniors, and Air Chief Marshal Arup Raha. Good evening, sir. and ladies and gentlemen. I think Mr. Peter Rimmele and Matheswaran have covered almost everything which needs to be given in an introduction. And my compliments for assembling a fantastic panel of experts to discuss this very important subject. A little bit about the background and, just to think of how aviation has changed the very concept of war ever since 1903 when the Wright brothers took to the sky. And thereafter, we have the First World War and the Second World War. And in the Second World War, we saw the phenomenal destructive capability of the air power. In fact, I can, besides, of course, the Battle of Britain, I can cite the 1,000 bomber raid on Cologne. And when the Colonians went to sleep, the next morning when they woke up, they just saw everything in shambles. So this is the might of air power. And then we saw, of course, the Pearl Harbor attack, and when the Japanese almost destroyed the US Navy in that Pearl Harbor. And then, of course, the Hiroshima and Nagasaki blast. Then post the Second World War, we saw the havoc being played in Vietnam, and the many other wars that have taken place, including the Gulf War. Sorry. The same air power, the same thing with the air, has been employed very intelligently by the terrorists. The most example which comes is the 9/11 attack on the World Trade Towers in New York. And much before that, this gentleman, Matthias, he went and he took off from Germany and went and landed in the Red Square in Moscow and changed the very concept of defenses of any city. And at that time, much later when I was in Paris, so this was the biggest question. How do you defend Paris from one maniac who gets airborne and he wants to go and hit into something? So they say, okay, it's a no-fly zone. Anybody who flies over there is to be shot down. But all said and done, a massive threat. And all the time, the systems were evolving as to how to handle the drones. The modern influence of drones in the Azerbaijan-Armenian war, and as well as Turkey, and as well as this, the Russian air base in Syria, Air Marshal Matheswaran has already covered it. When we talk of air power, I must specifically mention, I mean, the influence of air power, I must specifically mention what happened in Sri Lanka when the LTTE got 2 rattle-trap aeroplanes, and they had the guts to fly from the forests in Vanni jungle and go and bomb. It just could carry 275 kg bombs. That's it. And all it required was the skill of the pilot to fly deck level at night and go and bomb Colombo. The whole of the Indian Air Force, I must say, and as well as the Sri Lankans, were on alert to try and trace these 2 aeroplanes. And it was a mighty effort. Mighty effort. And in that meantime, they terrorized Colombo. In one night when the LTT aircraft came over Colombo, the the Sri Lankan Air Force fired 40,000 rounds of aircraft guns. So that was the panic and anything from the air could cause. Now, coming to what is happening in our country, we had something in Jammu. I have always been of the very firm belief that offense is the best form of defense. If a terrorist has a drone and he is able to, threaten you, we have the national resource. We have the national resource to make him pay dearly. And we showed it in Balakot. We showed it in our surgical strikes. These are some things that we should discuss. When the attack on Jammu happened, the whole of the armchair strategists started saying, the Air Force is sleeping and they don't know what to do. They haven't done anything so far, and they have been caught with their pants down. Unfortunately, no. If we are talking of the Harpy or the Harap, which was used by the Azerbaijanis in the recent war, we have had it for 25 years. So it's an open secret. So it's nothing that we have not been prepared. We have had the offensive weapons. It is, many a time I keep saying that we are as prepared as the evil thinker or the terrorist is thinking. So with this introduction, what I will do is, I will invite each one of the speakers in this sequence: Air Marshal Suresh, Group Captain Augustine, Wing Commander David Sagayam, Professor Soundar Rajan, Mr. Sai Pattabhiraman, and Mr. Abhishek Jain. I request you all to speak on your specialty for 6 to 7 minutes, one after another. And once you have spoken, all of you have spoken, we will thereafter discuss and then take on the questions from the audience. Having seen the excellent number, 143, that's a phenomenal number. So there are many curious members in the audience who will want to speak to you all, discuss with you all, probably give them the confidence of that we are okay, we are not so bad. So I invite Air Marshal Suresh to speak. And as far as Air Marshal Suresh is concerned, he's just a year and a half ago, he was commanding the Western Air Command, where Jammu is part of that base. And he was involved in most of the operations in Western Air Command when things were really hotting up in the West. So Suresh, there are many things you can cover in your operational talk that you would give us. And you can touch upon the global aspects as well. But primarily our ops preparedness and the global aspects. Over to you, Air Marshal Suresh.
Thank you, sir. Firstly, many thanks to Marshal Matheswaran, Captain Vijay Kumar, Peter, and MMA, as well as the Peninsula Foundation for inviting me on this panel. A very topical topic, I would say. But the problem is with Peter and Air Marshal Matheswaran and Air Marshal Varthaman having spoken, they have covered everything in broad. So I'll quickly run through what my take on the subject is. Before that, let me pay my respects to Air Chief Marshal Raha and Air Marshal Mahar. They've been our gurus also in TACD. Like Air Marshal Varthaman said, UAVs are not something new. And Air Marshal Matheswaran also talked about it. We have been discussing this for quite some time. But the main difference has been that we have been talking about military UAVs and state actors. But what has happened in the last 2 decades is a major change. Like Peter said, technologies, miniaturization, battery technology, propulsion technology, sensor technology, you name it. And it is actually, there's been an exponential change. And this has made also, actually it has made cheaper and more accessible. We are not just talking about commercial users and recreational users. That is a major portion which probably Sai will cover about. But when you're talking about security, this is a huge change of scene. And the biggest beneficiary actually has been the non-state actor from a security point of view. There is no need to elaborate on this point, but they have been the biggest beneficiaries. And be it war or peace. So if you're talking about Jammu, it's a peacetime activity what they indulged in. I mean, we were at peace. But be it peace or war, now it spreads across the whole spectrum. That is the issue, major issue. But when you're talking about non-state actors also, major changes on the lighter side, they don't need to have any suicide bombers anymore. Some of them will worry about it because they were expecting something in heaven, but that's not going to take place. But the major problem now is when you're talking about payloads, even minor payloads, different kinds of payload can be delivered even with micro UAVs, very small UAVs. That is an issue here. If you look at Jammu, and if you look at the penetrating warhead, of course, they used a pressure fuse, an impact fuse, but it's gone through the building. So that is a major difference actually that is taking place. When I'm talking from a security point of view, I'll put it in 3 different groups. The threat. One is, of course, the state actors, which Air Marshal Matheswaran talked about from military point of view, conflicts, etc. Another is non-state actors with state support. If you're talking about Jammu, again, probably we suspect Pakistan's support. If you talked about Syria, the Russian bases, they've actually talked about Syrian rebels being supported by Turkey. So these are the differences where. And finally, when you talk, the third group is the non-state actors acting independently from a purely security point of view. Now, of these, the second group is the most dangerous because that gives them accessibility to technology on the state side. So this is the worrying aspect. Coming to the first groups, they already covered the recent use of drones in Azerbaijan. Peter has covered it. They have used the Turkish Bayraktar PV2 drones, each of them with 4 hard points and laser-guided smart munitions. They have also used the Harap, which Air Marshal Vartha said that we have been using it for the last 20-25 years. Harap and the Harpy. And they also used the Orbiter 1K. But if you look at, but my take on the subject is please take it with a pinch of salt. I went through all the videos that they provided. Unfortunately, the Armenian side were out in the open, be it tanks or be it, everything was out in the open. The targets actually were there for the taking. They did not employ any particular kind of tactics, etc. So whenever if there are takeaways, we need to moderate the takeaways from this kind of a conflict where drones have been used in an offensive manner. It can be done, and also if you're talking about Armenian and Azerbaijani air forces, both are nothing much to speak about, especially Armenian. There were a total of only 3,500 personnel. So that is a little bit of a different scenario, like Marshal Vartha said. But then you come to the US attack, that is a state-sponsored thing on Major General Soleimani, along with 9 people. The MQ-9 was used with about 9 missiles. With about, with a fixed drone. When you're talking about non-state actors, the attacks on the Russian bases in Syria, 10 against the Russian air base and 3 against the naval base. But what is particularly important to note is that the Russians were able to neutralize all of them. 7 were actually shot down, 6 were brought down, out of which 3 were brought down safely. 3 got destroyed, but 3 were brought down and they were able to see. But the funny part of it is when you look at the videos and you see the thing, there's absolutely rudimentary. They're made out of plywood with motors and add-on rockets. So that was what was actually utilized over there. But then the Syrian rebels were backed by Turkey and the Russians are quite confident about that. When you come to non-state actors, the Houthi attacks in Saudi, oil facilities. The 13, actually, about 25 drones were used in 2 waves on 14 September 2019. And they were able to actually monitor about 19 strikes. That was quite a big one. It was more of a coordinated attack. From an Air Force standpoint, so if you look at it, if I were to actually study it and tell you, I have certain observations on the entire process. The attacks were mainly against highly visible targets. Then micro, small, and very small drone attacks were mainly against static targets. When you're talking about mobile targets, and especially also camouflage targets, underground targets, these are a very different kettle of fish. And especially if you talk about new generation HAS, etc., a lot of things will come in, a lot of other things need to come into play if we are talking about building a capability of our own. Then swarm capability was not so far very evident. There's a lot of stuff has been demonstrated, but not really operationally used. It is on the cards. It's very evident. Attacks were mostly restricted to planes. Now, if you're looking at India, we have a long border with China along the LAC, etc., and including the West. I'll come to that part later. But when you're talking about swarms and swarm drone attacks, a lot of requirements come into play. If you need to develop that capability, you need your absolute portion and relative portion accuracies of a very high order. You need very advanced data link algorithms. Autonomous swarm technology is a must. And that includes, like Marshal Matheswaran said, AI as well as robotics. You need targeting sensors if you really need to be actually effective. So what I will require as a user is a range and effectiveness and survivability. These are the three main things which I really require if you have to use it in an offensive manner. And larger ranges in smart munitions payloads. If you talk about Jammu airfield, actually it is less than 20 kilometers from the border. IB. The closest point IB is 20 kilometers. So it's very easy to actually do that kind of a thing. And like Marshal Varthaman said, it's not that we have been sleeping. We have had defenses. It is only that we don't have it in adequate numbers. We have been using it in the valley and very effectively at that. So when you're talking about swarm technology, it's a very tall order. I'm sure Mr. Sai and Abhishek Jain will cover their respective parts. From an offensive point of view, these are the points which they need to cover about, but purely from a defensive point of view, we need to watch out for, like what Peter said, Chinese capability. They are actually fast catching up on US capability, and we are aware of it. It's not that we are not aware of it. They demonstrated it also to some extent in Ladakh, but that was more of a show, and videos are available on the net. But we're also worried about what they can pass on to Pakistan as far as this technology is concerned. Pakistan will also get some support from the Middle East, as Turkey especially. But very specifically coming to that point, when you're talking about Ladakh, that area, and the eastern regions, Marshal Vartha will bear with me because we are the AOC-in-C Eastern Air Command. Terrain, weather, and altitude will play a major role as far as especially the smaller drones are concerned. So is some part of the IB on the western side with Pakistan. So it's not going to be very, very simple as far as that is concerned. Because we did dilly-dally with it, but I don't want to go into the details, but there are issues on that count. Altitude, weather, and terrain. All three will play a major part. This is what the industrialists need to actually look into, and they can probably throw some light on it. Immaterial of the fact that we operated from Ladakh and things like that. We did expand operations in Ladakh. This is actually a peculiarity of our region, and not many cater for it. In terms of weapons, you need it, not many cater for it, and especially weapons. The types of offensive drones that we have taken to our calculations are offensive attacks, actually, offensive operations, are mainly ISR, that you cannot deny, kinetic attacks, electronic attacks, decoys, distraction. Those are all part of the planning process as far as warfighting is concerned. And after China's gift by way of the Wuhan virus, a lot of things have been said in the public domain and on social media, but you can expect easily. It's a reality, biological warfare and chemical warfare. That can also be delivered by this medium. So that needs to be taken into your calculations. We'll be doing a mistake otherwise. Now, it can be delivered by individual drones, coordinated attacks, swarm drones, and like Marshal Matheswaran said, teaming of manned and unmanned. That is manned aircraft as well as unmanned teams. HAL has got a program called the CATS that is actually being developed. So that will be a major thing. But personally, if you ask me, and this I have been doing for a long time, and I also did discuss with HAL for a program using one of the older aircraft, trainer aircraft, as a first-person view aircraft. If you want a little more effect, like I said, I want penetration capability, survivability, precision, and effect. If you want that, then I need to have something called the FPV. I'm very sure all of you are quite familiar with the first-person view because it is used currently for recreational purposes, but it has got a huge warfighting potential also. If you're talking about defense now, the offensive part, I will leave it to the industry to talk about and what national capability they're building up. There is no single type of sensor that can take care of anything. So if you talk about the radars, the older version of radars, the RCS, etc., what you're talking about are those drones, especially the smaller ones, it cannot pick up. But if you have the MMR variety, anti-drone radars, They can, but they are limited in range. Maybe about 3 kilometers typically or 4 kilometers, including if you talk about ISA technology, whatever is available. Coming to the UIR sensors, there is a problem there. They've got very low visual as well as thermal signatures, depending upon the signature from the hot batteries, etc. So there again, there is a problem. Then we are talking about passive imaging. So passive imaging is actually in the UE, visible as well as near IR spectrum, or thermal imaging in the near, in the short, medium, and long wavelength IR. So it is not foolproof. Passive surveillance systems are available to detect electromagnetic emissions, but actually they will not work against autonomous drones or even swarm drones, which are swarm drones it may, because data link is a must over there. So it will not work against individual autonomous drones. Acoustic sensors has got very low acoustic signatures, but again, it will be limited in range. So this is an issue. The most effective is actually visual, from what we have seen. And if you're talking about till now what we have been doing, whether it's the Republic Day parade, whether it's the Independence Day, function at Red Fort or Aero India, etc. We have been deploying anti-drone systems. It is not that we have not been deploying, but a large dependency is there on visual spotting and shooting down by snipers. That is the responsibility of the Air Force and the Delhi police as far as functions in Delhi is concerned. Okay, but that is the current state of affairs, but things have improved. And today we have the capability to jam and spoof. So that is existing, but only problem is that we don't have adequate numbers. So if you're talking about soft and hard kill options, jamming and spoofing is the way to go. I said we have the capability, but then again, it comes with its attendant problems. When you're talking about omnidirectional jamming or directional jamming, we tried both, but it has collateral damages. Seeing that it functions in the 2.4 to 5 gigahertz, it has collateral damages. You're well aware of what the damage can be. When you're talking about directional jamming again, now the major problem first is detection. Second is actually localizing. Even if you want to neutralize it kinetically, or if you want to neutralize it, get a software kill, that is jamming, etc., precision is required, tracking. Or even if you want to get a kinetic kill, or even using lasers or the electromagnetic spectrum, you need precision. So that is actually a challenge by itself. So again, when we come down to high, then you can look at visual and high rate of fire weapons as well as sharpshooters. This commercial and recreational drones, what we need to, I said it's a peacetime as well as wartime function. There's a huge problem during peacetime. So this again, I'm sure I leave it to the others to cover it. The regulatory framework, in discussions we had with the bureaucracy, with the Home Ministry, when I was the ACS Ops AD, we did have a lot of fair amount of discussions. There are issues. The major problem is the awareness at every level on what is the level of threat. During peacetime, I'm not just talking about this non-state actors hitting and jump, but even otherwise, from recreational users, what exactly it can lead to. Across the world, this has happened. France, sir, Batasa, you will vouch for it. The airports actually have been invaded to a large. There are so many incidents over there. In India, there have been incidents. So you need to have a regulatory framework. One of the major things which we need to, if you leave out the nano drones, you need to get everybody to register. Geofencing has to be made mandatory, and some kind of rules. They have brought out the last month. They come out with the rules, drone use rules, etc. The DGCA, but they are just the broad framework that will not do. So during peacetime, all the drones, you need to make them function. Whatever the aircraft rules are, regulations are, you need to have civil aviation rules for the drones also. So if you're talking about air defense function, etc., the air defense, you need an air defense clearance number within the ADIZ. So whether you're emanating from within the ADIZ, transiting through, or landing here, you need to have an air defense clearance number. all of them need to have cooperative recognition capability or transponders on board. Like the ADS-B. On ships, on trawlers, we can have AIS. So like that, we need to have, so at least you know who all are operating. And then it will be simpler to make out who are the threats. So, but I'll stop with that. I'll leave it at that, sir. And I'll leave it to the others to cover this part of this thing as far as defense is concerned. But from an Air Force point of view, as far as defensive side is concerned, it will take a little bit of time to get the numbers, but the capabilities are there. Soft kill option capability exists. Hard kill options are well on the way. I'll leave it as. Thank you.
Thank you, Suresh. That was a very nice overview. And one of the things which come out is that we have our defenses and nothing to really panic so much. We just need to acquire. But there are some things which you talked about, the GPS spoofing and other mechanisms which can interfere with the navigation systems of the drone. And this is what, I think Group Captain Augustine can talk about, and talk about the use of drones and employment of drones at those altitudes, which Marshal Suresh was saying, we have to work it out, that is in the Ladakh area. And he also mentioned something about the rules that govern drone operations. I understand that you were involved with the DGCA framing the rules. There is nothing like a fighter pilot and a designer putting the in the same brain, putting what do I say, ideas into practice. So I request Group B Augustine to cover these aspects in your talk just now. Thank you.
Thank you, Marshal Varthaman, and all distinguished members. And I may be a sole panelist here who had the opportunity of working with probably all of you. So I consider that as a blessing more than anything. And thank you so much to allowing me to be part of such an august gathering. Be it as it may, I'll divide since the time I hung up my uniform, a lot of insight into non-military stuff. And non-military stuff is what currently excites me more than military. And military stuff that I wanted to speak, most of it, all of you have spoken and took a little bit of wind out of my sail. So that makes my job even more easy. And since you all have set the tone. And few issues that Marshal Suresh covered, I thought I would probably throw some more light on it in the interest of clarity and more than anything else. So coming straight to the talk. First, we'll finish the brass tacks first, which is the military aspect of it. I was fortunate enough that immediately after the Aramco attack, I was at Saudi. By then, I'd retired. I was at Saudi. I was at their air headquarters, discussing on the Aramco attack per se. So, and after that, Azerbaijan-Armenia thing happened. Like speakers before me correctly covered, that a miniature weapon like this, how do we counter a miniature weapon like this? So to give a fair idea, because most of us have some idea, but to give a fair idea, miniature is how small? F-18 quietly launched, maybe most of us have read about it, quietly launched swarm drones, which is fighter launched swarm drones, and it is probably the only fighter launched swarm drone that we know of. As a company, we also demonstrated to the Indian Air Force at Pokhran range, at sweltering some 50 degrees temperature during that Baba Mayer competition, a swarm drone of 11 in autonomous mode with the data link, like Marshal Suresh covered. Data link becomes the backbone of the swarm drones. The data link was MIMO meshnet capable. So we had a scout and slave concept. The scout went forward, picked up from the box the survivors using artificial intelligence, machine learning, boxed them, transmitted their individual position to every single drone, and these drones went and dropped 1 liter of water bottle and 1 packet of biscuit. It could be anything that could be dropped on top. So our team worked post this swarm drone. Our team worked a lot on how do we automate the process of identifying what do you want to identify from a running video at the lowest possible latency. So that currently is a challenge that AI/ML is kind of touching and peaking against, especially as far as the image recognition and identification is concerned. So to give you a little idea of how it works or how does it look, I will quickly probably show you by just sharing my screen. So this is the trials that we did at Tripura. This is one of the very famous temple in Tripura. So from this running video, we were trying to identify on the fly, I mean, as low latency as possible. What are the people, bike, car, etc. So this is how the result came out to be. So you saw that very clearly that you had an image, you had people in the image, and those were neatly boxed, which we all agree that it will be humanly impossible to do with such a low latency with human intervention. So that is where AI/ML comes into play. Now, once having boxed, now you have a lot of information from that box. Since the image itself is a geotagged image, you can further get the LLA, the lat, long, and altitude of that particular image, and you can play with it the way you want to play with it. So it's all about handling of data after that. The data that is flowing to and fro is from a very robust data link. Now, how does a very robust data link work? The throughput of the data link becomes now the key portion in the whole of swarm drone working. In 11 swarm drone, we had to downlink our video downlink from 1080p to 320p to get the latency right. So there are a lot of challenges when we are talking about swarm drone. So that swarm drone aspect is over. Now let's talk about threat. And I'll take a leaf out of what Marshal Suresh covered. There are 3 methods. I mean, I've covered that in many of my TV interviews as well. There are 3 methods to pick up the drone. One is using the drone radar. Second is using the data link, that is triangulating when drone talks to the ground or talks to another drone, triangulating it. And third is using acoustics. A little bit of, or maybe my understanding is different. Acoustics of all the 3 shows biggest promise, because the other 2 are not so great as of now. And especially if the drone is coming electronically silent, the electronic portion, electronic triangulation goes out of the window. Now we are left with picking it up on a Avian class of radar. Now the Asian class of radar, look at this is the size. This is the size of Perdix. Perdix was the drone which was launched by F-18, 7 inches across. Now, most of it is made out of plastic. I don't think we have a radar which can pick this up anywhere beyond, the best of the radar, which came from Israelis, I believe. I mean, I was supposed to be part of the trials last week. But the result I got to know was a bigger, almost 4 times the size of this drone, was picked up at 100 meters. but by the best of the drone radar. So, I mean, we all are professionals and air defense professionals here. At 100 meters, how do we prosecute? How many phalanx guns will you have? How many close-in weapon systems will you have? What really shows promise is the acoustics, the SATA battery. So a very pointed, it's exactly like what we used to have over range called the misdistance calculator. I remember the first of the MDC-80s were put up in Kalaikunda. So it's very similar to misdistance calculator. So you have 3-4 mics, very sensitive mics, directional mics kept, and they will be able to pick up these drones coming in. Our trial shows a drone of this size comfortably can be picked up at about 1 to 1.5 kilometers. Currently, we are doing a trial with only one mic, so we are only getting a directional line. If we put two, we'll be able to triangulate as well. So acoustics is showing very great promise. So of the air defense problem, which is to detect, then to identify, then to destroy or divert, the first problem we have discussed. Second is identification and a little bit of correction to what Marshal Suresh covered. To put an ADSB on all drones, it is impossible, and in fact ICAO prohibits us from doing it. The simple reason is ADSB works on the existing system, that is your existing IFF 1090 megahertz. It uses the look-through time, that is little bit of look-through time that you have. It is called the ADSB squitter actually. So in that squitter time, it pushes the information, all required information in burst. So that is how the ADSB update is like 5 seconds. There is no extra equipment that airlines are willing to invest on or buy. They're going to use the existing IFF, the existing modest transponder, and in that small look-through time, they are pushing the information. So that little squitter time that the aeroplanes have, ICAO is not willing to partake that with any drone. Drones are prohibited from using ADSB, basically because we don't want to clutter that little look-through window that we have currently. Eventually, when the ATC, civilians call it ATC, we call it IFF. When the ATC or IFF is thrown out of the window, probably. But currently, the time available is 0.3 seconds in which you have to push the data, digital data. And it is for an ADSB, which is broadcast, it's only a broadcast. So it is only an ADSB out. You only shout your LLA and etc., etc. So there is a little bit of an issue there. If you want to put something else on the drone, that's something about that something else, I will let Mr. Sai cover, because he's come out with some wonderful tracking system using your internet, using your mobile SIM card. In fact, we have already signed up an MOU. Sai sir and I are working together, and we've been proponent of this particular tracker system, which will give you seamless tracking of drones, which will give you, even if you want NP, or whatever you want to do, very wonderfully and much better than anything that is there global. I mean, I say this with a lot of pride and conviction that we have such systems coming up, and we have such, just before we started, Abhishek also covered it. We have such people working on such wonderful systems. Now coming to the miniaturization of such a small drone. You know, this was 2009. I hold this, I keep it with me. This is called a KK2 board, and I bought it from Mr. Sai. That time he was trading that time. KK2 board, 2009. And there is a YouTube video of mine flying a multi-rotor using this board, uploaded in 2009, when Marshal Varthaman was the AOC-in-C. From there, we moved on to this kind of board. These are strap-on systems, ladies and gentlemen. It has 10 degrees of freedom. You have all kinds of sensor here. It does not have any RLG kind of a system. You don't need stabilized platform for this to work. This has 10 degrees of freedom. In ARM Cortex, and in fact, I've taken the picture of this, I'll show it to you. The ARM Cortex, the chipset with 128 GB data on this. There is no autopilot in the world on a manned aircraft that comes anywhere close to this particular flight controller. Anywhere close. I mean, 1/10 of the capability none of the Airbus autopilot would have. Why? Because the manned aeroplane system taking on the advancement in technology is very slow. Whereas in drones, it is like, if I can make it today, fly tomorrow and put it to use day after. So that is the kind of advantage we have on the drone system. So when the things go smaller and smaller and smaller, there is another FC of mine, which is just 1/4 of the size, 10 times more powerful than the one which I'm holding in my hand. How do we prosecute this? That I will take a leave from Marshal Varthaman, what he said. And I've been a proponent of this. There is TV interviews of mine, you can go and see. For this offense, it is like nuclear. I mean, you need to have nuclear offensive capability for defending against any nuclear powered nation. It is something very, very similar to this. Offense is the solution for this. If you hit me with one small drone, I will hit you with 10 small drones. Not that I will not spend money on trying to find a defensive system for it. I will. But a defensive system, by now we know, is going to be an extremely, extremely costly proposition. And Air Force has just embarked on it. I do not know why. This anti-drone system that Air Force has embarked on, that RFI that has come out, it is going to cost us a bomb. Do we need it? Will it look after our requirement? I have a big, big question mark on that particular subject. Coming to an important aspect which I'm probably flagging for the first time is that all of you learned people could think about it. And some of you are probably even still now connected with the policy matters of Air Force, is do we need a drone command? I think it is high time we talk about drone command. Drone command is something which I feel is much needed, much faster it needs to come. And that in the gamut of theater command, I don't know how is it going to fit. I really have my doubt. That is something that as retired professionals, if we can push it to the government and say that, please spend your money wisely. So that is something I would think that we should take it from here, at least from the Peninsula Foundation, and push it up forward. A word about MUMTI, man-unmanned teaming. Man-unmanned teaming has been there. It has been there for probably 20 plus years. Micro UAVs being used or other rovers being used with the special forces, it has been there. Now, man-unmanned teaming aerially is something which is going to be a reality a couple of years down the road. A manned aeroplane doesn't need to cross the border. My drones, which I may carry it on the wing, or my bigger mothership like C-130s would launch it, can go across, fire and come back. It can carry my missiles. I need to have a very good radar and probably a couple of close-in weapon protection for myself. Rest offensive capability, it can be carried by the drones. I don't need to land to rearm. I can refuel in air, but I can't rearm in air today. How do I rearm in air? If my loyal wingman has fired his 4 missiles, he goes and lands. The other loyal wingman comes up with the fresh 4 missiles. I don't need to land. So man-unmanned teaming in the fighter pilot environment is going to change tremendously. And if we do not get on board quickly, we will get left behind. I've written a paper on it and yet to publish it, sir. I will probably give it to Marshal Matheswaran. Probably we'll take it forward. And coming to the first aspect which I covered. Now that the brass tacks is out of the way, I'll come to the biggest opportunity that we have as far as drones are concerned, the civilian area, and for which I will not talk. I will let Goldman Sachs talk. So I will quickly share, some of you may be aware, I'll quickly share what the Goldman Sachs research on the subject or the report on the subject is. So I'm just sharing my screen. This is, you can go to this particular website called Goldman Sachs Insight and drones reporting for work. I have gone to the last slide. Okay, I'll go to the last slide or last aspect of this. What does it say? It says the evolution, with the evolution of regulations, we see drones headed for new heights in the business world. The same safety, efficiency, and cost benefit that appeals to military makes drone attractive for a wide range of business in the civilian environment. And this is the kicker. 100 billion market opportunity we forecast in the next 5 years is just tip of the iceberg. Drones' full economical potential is multiple times that number. And that is what we need to understand clearly. So, and you will be surprised if I ask you a quiz that which area in the civilian world do you think is making most amount of money? If I ask you this question, probably most of you will get it wrong. So let me, without much this thing, show you which is that area which as per Goldman Sachs is going to give us more money. And that is construction business. Construction is going to take the drone market to multi-million or multi-million dollar business. And another important thing which I wanted to cover with you all is dual use technology. The current crop spraying drone, we have developed one. Current crop spraying drone has a payload capability of almost 13 to 14 kilos. Can be well converted to carrying a 13 to 14 kilos of worms. So that is where I am in agreement with Suresh sir, that beyond a certain category of drone, an air defense clearance is a must, because air defense is Air Force's baby. And like Marshal covered, Marshal Varthaman covered, the question will get asked to us, why are you guys sleeping? Aap kya so rahe the? That question will get asked to us. If the policy framework is not in place, then how are we going to address this issue? That is a question which I am leaving it open. Air defense is a war which we are fighting every day, which none of the civilians will understand. It's a war we are fighting every single day. Every single day, the air defense of India is up. At the ORP, people are fully kitted, fully weaponized and waiting to go. That we need to understand and put it forward in that perspective. So that so it is a fine balance between defense of a nation, which in our case is very, very peculiar. We are not like US surrounded by Mexico and Canada. We are a nation surrounded by Pakistan and China, both inimical nations to us. And lastly, sir, I'll just leave you with one small little video. This is the drone which we gave it to Indian Army. It flew in Galwan, and it was a tethered power drone. It flew, I believe, for, I mean, technically, it can fly for unlimited endurance because the power is given from the ground. And I mean, of course, they didn't take us for the trials, but I believe it flew for almost 7 days. This is another drone which is called the Transition, which takes off vertically and flies like a fixed wing drone. So this in the fixed wing mode, and the same one in the VTOL mode. So it transits, and as it gets airborne, it switches off all its 4 propellers and flies like a fixed-wing aeroplane, and comes back and lands like a vertical aeroplane. So with that, I thank Peninsula Foundation for giving me the opportunity to speak on the subject which is closest to my heart. And I'll also urge people who are watching this program, put your heart and head into drones for good. Drones, mark my words, ladies and gentlemen, drones are going to touch our lives in more aspects than one. IT was 80s boom, 90s boom. Drones is the boom which is multiple times that IT. I'm not saying it, Goldman Sachs is saying it. Uganda is a great example. IT boom did not touch Ugandans, but drones touched Ugandans. In the farthest reach of small villages in Uganda, where even mobile phones don't reach, drones take the blood there. Drones takes the medicines there. Drones are going to touch our lives because of this miniaturization. Thank you so much. Thank you, Marshal Matheswaran, sir.
Thank you.
So just a small clarification. Like Augustine, I think, got me wrong, because when you're talking about ADSB, it is not for drones. Like Mr. Sai will bear with me, because I think he's quoted somewhere around 600,000 is the number which is available in India today, but anywhere from 200,000 to 600,000. So of course you cannot. And when you're talking about flights which are transiting over India, air defense, it is in the region of 8,500. So you see the difference in numbers, but transponders, and this is something which we did trials with SATCOM for tracking, especially in high altitude terrains, and like what the terrain what I was talking about, and it was quite successful. So that is something which we need to bring into our regulatory framework for tracking. We need to know everything that is airborne beyond a certain capacity. You will understand that because you commanded the ADDC.
Yes, sir. And Sai sir has come out with some wonderful stuff. I'll leave him to talk about it. Really wonderful stuff.
Right. Thank you, Group P. Augustine. Lots of very, very interesting things you are working upon, and it shows immense capability to produce our own. You know, when we started talking about drones about 25, 30 years ago, and the Israelis told us, you know what, we make it in garages. There's no big deal. Okay. And so since then, much water has flown in the Ganga, and I see that so much of intelligence has gone into it, and I'm sure we can do wonders. We are a little bit, not little bit, we are way behind time. We still have 4 speakers to speak. I will now request Vinko David Devasahayam to speak. I request David, if you can restrict yourself to 5 minutes. And he's actually employed the drones in operations, both externally and as well as internally against the in the Maoist area. So I think you're the ideal person to talk about the operational employment as well as the technology that is going into the development. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Vartha sir. And actually, Augie sir and Suresh sir have conveyed so much. There is no sail left for me. I'll have to pull some oars and start rowing as we used to row our boats when we were in the UAV squadrons in the Air Force. So it's an honor to be here. Coming straight down to the thing, I want to talk about something totally different from what Augie sir and Suresh sir spoke about, which is as an operations person is very important. So the first thing I would like to just touch upon is the manpower who are used to operate these systems. So it's very important, out of my experience, what I've seen with the Air Force and sometime with the Indian Army also. The manpower has to be have to have a particular technology knowledge. their knowledge on operating systems, their understanding of how an air situation is, both from a military as well as a civilian perspective. I really don't find that in people as much as one would expect it in the Air Force. So this is one area which needs to be looked into while we talk about, very advanced systems, chipsets. But finally, it comes down to the human being who's going to operate that system. And it's very important that he's trained well and he understands all aspects of whatever system he's going to operate. The second thing I want to speak, this is one issue that we found a big problem when we were operating our system in Raipur and Jagdalpur. And at Jagdalpur, they had normal, the traffic police beat cops who were going into the jungles, and we had to pass on the information to them, but they could not understand the information which we were giving them because they didn't even know how to plot a coordinate on a map. This was way back in 2005, 2006. So, of course, things have changed now, and CRPF has got a pretty good setup in a place close to Jagdalpur where they are training people. And of course, their knowledge is much better than what it used to be. But still, we need to invest in our human capital, especially the people who are going to operate these systems. The next thing is, while we make good aircraft, actually the product that we require is the intelligence. So I found a huge difference today in the kind of imagery that we're able to generate with really, really small cameras. The small cameras that are available today can give almost an equal resolution and picture quality what we have been operating the searchers and herons for since 20 years ago. So miniaturization and improvement in the payload quality capability is something that we really need to look at. The third thing that I want to speak about is meteorology, and especially operating in high terrain. It's not easy. So the manpower has to be fit, whoever are operating in this kind of terrain. And we need to understand the meteorological conditions, especially in places like Leh, Ladakh, and even the upper reaches in Arunachal, Sikkim, where it's completely different. The way the atmosphere is in the hills, in the mountains, is totally different. So now, when you operate these small UAVs over there, the rules are very different. The knowledge base in terms of meteorology for an operator needs to be of a very high order if he wants to, get the most out of his system. Batteries is an issue when we're operating in these cold climates. There was a recent article, about 6 months back, where they were talking about some Chinese drones, a Chinese helicopter drone, which people were saying is getting deployed in the mountainous terrain. But if you actually look at it logically, it's very difficult. Over there, operating a rotary kind of aircraft, which is above 100 kgs, especially at the altitudes of Leh, Ladakh and higher. If you go to Nyoma and places ahead of that, it's much higher. It becomes very difficult. Operating even these small systems requires a lot of skill, a lot of knowledge, especially in terms of metrology. The last thing I would speak about is coming to the drone regulations. I think the drone regulations now, what the new civil aviation minister has done is awesome. The previous drone regulations, the philosophy behind those drone regulations was how to not allow people to fly. It was not made with a philosophy or a bent of mind how to get people to fly. And unless you're going to get people to fly and make things friendly, you're not going to be able to achieve that a piece of that cake of that 100 billion what Augie was talking about. So our drone regulations have to be made by operators. You can't have non-operators make drone regulations. Now, as far as, with all due respect to DGCA, they had their maintenance section people draw up the drone regulations. They were in charge of it. I think that's a mistake. I think they need to use expertise. There's a huge amount of expertise available with the Air Force. They need to ask Air Force for expertise, especially in terms of operators, and make the rules accordingly. I'm happy that the rules now are totally different, and I think there is hope for the future. Thank you very much, sir, for this opportunity.
Thank you, David. And this is something that you mentioned about manpower and the resource. It was last 2-3 decades, it was the biggest issue in the US because the global hawk flew out of US and went into the Gulf area, and it flew for the next few days. And they had a huge problem of operator fatigue. And to remain alive with the global hawk and the predator flying in that area. And human resource was the factor. And human resource as well as human resource or what do I say, recognition of the performance. It is a difficult subject. I don't know whether the Air Force has addressed this issue, but you have touched on a very important thing. I'm glad to hear that the new DGCA rules are much better and favors drone operations. But I was a little sorry to hear Mr. Peter telling that in Germany, they are going to prevent the use of drones. Perhaps in the Q&A, we can touch on them. Now I have Professor Soundar Rajan. I just mentioned before we started the talk, the amount of co-learning that Professor and the Air Force have done, and myself and Matheswaran as well, is tremendous. I used to tell that it's about time he started wearing the Air Force uniform. So much of work we have done. Professor, nice to see you, Soundar Rajan. You can touch on so many aspects and our capability. I'm sure you would have been working on the development of the Rustam, which we started many years back, and what has happened in the years gone by. So you could tell us about the DRDO and our development that is going on towards the drone operations and drone development. Over to you, Soundar Rajan.
Thank you, Marshal. I would make it easy. There's so many of them, and it's great to be with you all. In fact, it came to my mind that I should start with talking about something very ancient. One of the first unmanned systems that we launched, unmanned air systems, was a missile target called Fluffy. I'm quite sure, of course, we worked in everything that we did, we worked with ASTE. They used to launch it from Canberra, and we used to take it to Sri Lanka and present it as a target to the air defense system. That was the aim. Now, it was a wonderful project, but as usual, failed due to so many other reasons. One of the most important reasons being it took too many sorties and so many, it's an expendable drone, so it went away. But while on this subject, we were trying to also, that was an analog autopilot using operational amplifiers, etc. So we started digitizing it. And then we wanted to try the digital autopilot on a more reliable drone rather than. So Air Force was very kind enough to give us Chakor. I think quite a few of you might be knowing about Chakor, which is operating in Kalekunda. So we took this digital autopilot that we have made and then integrated with it. And we took a couple of months to do ground integration, design integration, and all that. Then we also had to have telemetry as part of the system to monitor what happened. So on the ground itself, moment I turn on the telemetry, all the control surfaces are going into saturation. All were finished. Then we found out, and we went into the details, the Chakor, though it is made by Northrop, one of the foremost in the world, was not EMI protected, EMI-EMC protected, not shielded. And to our surprise, the operators told us whenever this Chakor flew into a microwave data link, which were those days primary, even now they are there, it used to simply lose control and fall apart. I want to, since I have extremely good audience there, leaders, captains of the industry in the drone, I would like to bring out that the limitations of the current drone systems. The current drone systems grew from the radio control drones, RC toys actually. They came from there and went up. If you take the avionics system, we also did not have much avionics in the beginning, but the avionics system that we have on our the civil aircraft, civil airlines, and also increasingly now with the fighter aircraft is very, very robust, very well structured. For example, we have a communication system, navigation system, surveillance system. We have so many of them identified as systems and integrated together through a mission computer for performing a mission. Over and above this, we have a flight control system. Now, the drones grow from the so-called controller. That means the flight control system is the core today. So I want to bring out that, yes, that's a good idea. It's cost effective. It is working. But then if you want robustness, what should you do? So I'm going to touch upon communication, navigation, and surveillance. That is identification for UAVs. So this is not normally looked at. UAVs are not looked at from this angle in the current in the parlance. So as we can see, one of the communication, very simple, it's a data link, and many of the data links are absolutely unprotected with very limited RF power and receiver sensitivity, and they're not professionally designed like what we do for aircraft or avionics systems, and hence they are very easily jammable. And one of the most important methods of drone defense was first introduced in a system called Mesmer. This Mesmer is nothing but a system that just picks up the data link between the controller and of the drone, controller to the drone, decodes the data structure, and then just with a higher power, literally spoofs the data, the ICD of the data, and then brings down the drone. This was invented, and it is a very, what do you call that? Selling quite a lot in large numbers. It's called Mesmer. It's a very simple thing, but of course, that is one example of how the data link problem is. We discussed data link when it came to swarms. See, the swarms need to communicate among themselves. And as if I had seen Chakor, which was a military drone, compared to the drones that we are talking about, the fighter aircraft just have, in my humble opinion, you just have to open up your radar, and a couple of drones will be lost to the radar jamming. It is as simple as that. But it has to be seen. More professionally, we use high power microwave, or it has been discussed already how to jam these communications. So in order to have robust communication, obviously then you have to go into a domain of spread spectrum or frequency hopping. All these things, I don't know. I don't think the civil side will be able to accommodate in the cost. Cost is the main driver. So if you look at the global hawk or something like that, you can imagine the number of data links that are there, the number of spread spectrum and FH systems that are going on. Coming down to the current drone systems that are going to be operational, we are going to depend, even in the FAA guidelines, we are going to operate through internet. Internet is going to be the core. That means the drone communicates to is savvy. They've got a GSM terminal or equivalent, maybe the 5G in future, 4G, 5G, and then it'll communicate to the controller, and controller is on the internet. So the guy, his ID, everything is in a mass storage database, and it will contribute towards the air traffic management system. Not only air traffic, even the UTM system. So when it comes to, okay, that's enough about the data link. So it has to be there. If it is not there, then you have to have an extremely good navigating system. And now the group captain Augustus showed us a lovely board, mainly consisting of MEMS, gyroscopes, and accelerometers. And they just drift. They drift 100 times or 1,000 times compared to the RLGs we use on aircraft. So now, how do we use them? Yes, of course they are being used, and all the drones are successful. How do they do that? They update it with the GPS, mainly GPS. But GPS is very, very vulnerable. Now, the Indian rules are saying that you should bring in IRNSS. It is equally vulnerable. That is because the satellite is 26,000 kilometers away, and it doesn't have much power. So you need something like 100 milliwatts to 1 watt power to jam and deny navigation ability to this. So the only way to do that is to look at other stuff. One of the most important things is vision-based navigation with a simple camera. Of course, for this, you need to have good weather. If you don't have, they are now the latest talk about the radars in cars, because the radars in aircraft are too expensive. Radars in cars for automatic driver assistance systems or self-driving cars are getting into the drones, and they can also be used. So a combination of vision-based system, digital terrain profile matching, data link updates, dead reckoning systems, all these are essential when it comes to the navigation system. Now, I'm very happy to see Augustus and the other Sai Pattabhiram working on the boards that you're talking about, the controller boards, the autopilots. But the software for this has been, as far as I know, is extremely difficult. We have been developing algorithms, flight control system algorithms, then implementing them, try to flight evaluate them. It's a very, very tough stuff. But over the years, the civils, the public domain knowledge that is there in the civil has helped them to use codes used in other programs without too much worrying about certification, etc. So the vision-based navigation system is pretty complex. In order to develop it ourselves would be difficult, but we can always follow the consortiums like Drone Code, so and so, and we can always do this. So if we want to do this in our country, it is high time we try to understand this. Not necessarily independently, collectively we can get together and get these algorithms and the flight control software that goes into it certified. Because ultimately, if you want dual-use drones, which can be migrated to use by the services, I'm not talking about the simple quadcopter drones. I'm talking about more aggressive medium and small, medium and large drones. The small ones, of course, you cannot put anything more on that. The weight is at a premium.
Soundar, we are running out of time. Huh?
Yeah, I'll just close saying that when it comes to, we talked about artificial intelligence, and it's a very interesting, the swarms and artificial intelligence and NCW. But we all should remember that artificial intelligence requires powerful processing elements, which will draw a lot of power. And hence, on extremely small drones, which are part of the swarms, we should think twice about being able to implement these things. With this, I have, of course, I can speak for years, but thank you.
Thank you, Professor. I think the professor has flagged many issues of the autopilot and stabilizing systems, which I think Mr. Sai would be able to answer. And especially, of course, you can touch upon the very, the commercial use of drones in our country, which I think you're a specialist in that. But more importantly, on the issues which were flagged by Professor. Over to you, Mr. Sai.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks a lot for having me on here. What I was thinking about was the third part of the, title of the event, and that was about national capabilities. Because I think we've talked about a lot of, Gusty's covered a lot of technical aspects, so has the professor, and others have covered a lot of technical aspects relating to drones. But I think one of the critical issues is if India wants to really get into a point where, we want to be, we have the opportunity, whether we can, and if we want to use that opportunity to be a global dominator in drones, we need to think about certain aspects of how the national capabilities have been. And here I will just bring in, I'll just mention it, and I'm sure Gusty would also agree with this, that we need to delve a little behind onto the drone regulations per se. And I think one of the critical dates was the 7th of October 2014, when a notification was issued banning the use of civilian drones. And I think this has had a huge impact on the national capability as far as drones in India is concerned, primarily because we were not that far behind the Chinese pre-2014. But I think post-2014, when the drone industry was practically sent underground, and there was 6 lakh, and 6 lakhs is a figure, sir, which is quoted by me, is not quoted by me, it's a figure that has been quoted by the national security agencies in a public domain. So the estimate is 6 lakh illegal drones. The 6 lakh illegal drones, not one of which an Indian industry could access, because of the fact that Indian industries could not, make drones, while the Chinese could get in illegal drones through smuggling channels. So this set our national capabilities back by at least 5 years, if not more, and helped the Chinese to build their capabilities through a clandestine way. So considering this, till 27th of August 2018, the drone regulation was not there. And post that till today, it is about it is there, but it's not there. It's not, it's not implementable. And we would say that the period between 2014 and 2018 was a case where there was no implementation teeth that was there to a notification. So there was nothing anybody could do about it. So we were also so as a company, we had an autopilot, which was supported by the Department of Science and Technology through the TIFAC fund, and we had developed this autopilot. In 2015, we landed up with a product, but without a market. So we moved on to other areas, which has been good for us. We went on to automobiles, and we learned about doing automobile tracking. And what was referred to as the GPS tracker is a specification that's come from the automobile side. And why I say that the automobile is a good benchmark for understanding drones, especially the civilian space, is because the cost of a motorcycle and the cost of a civilian drone are fairly similar. They're about $1.5 lakh each. The ownership is again fairly similar. The distribution among the population is also fairly similar. Unlike aircraft which operate from specific point to another specific point, these operate all over the place. And people use it, as we say, from the Shadi Wala Baba all the way up to mapping and surveying operations. So all these things come to a point where get us to a point where where the drone regulations have just started coming in now. And I would say one of the good things that is happening today as far as the commercial side for the Indian drone industry is the fact that the Defense Make in India initiative, where there are positive lists of indigenization, negative lists of import, and the freedom of the commercial or the DGCA's regulation on drones. Both these are coming in together at the same time, and the aligning of these two is a very, very positive sign as far as the future of the drone industry is concerned in India, and the capabilities that can be developed in-house. So as I've already mentioned, the tracker that we are suggesting and that we are working on is a GPS tracker which is based on GSM, and that can be connected to any kind of it can be connected to the digital sky, or it could be connected to any dashboard kind of platform, where it could be localized dashboards to be provided to ATCs around the place to monitor the drone activity. It need not be a centralized dashboard. So these kind of innovations are being looked at and are taking a center stage within the drone industry. Now, so I would say the coming together of these two, the dual use side of it, where you have the military side as the civilian side, the coming together is a real opportunity on which I think the Indian drone ecosystem can turn out to be a global dominator, mainly because we have a huge Indian market ourselves. So a captive market gives us a huge advantage as compared to many other players in the world. Now, coming next to the point of what David said about the use of small cameras. Now, this is coming in from the mobile technologies, and these are all being exploited in the drones. So to answer Professor's point of view, a lot of the miniaturization, sir, in the civilian drone space and in the smaller drone space is sensors, technologies, and capabilities coming from the world of mobiles, the world of computing, where where miniaturization has already happened. So we are essentially only taking those things and converting them into drone-related products. So they are used. They have proved to be robust. They are proving to be quite effective. Now, coming to the point of certification that you mentioned, now definitely certification is required for the defense use and for the other side, and for ruggedness and for other field operational characteristics. But for the civilian space, the level of certification that we're talking about, I don't think it's really necessary, and most of the civilians wouldn't even pay for it. And making it mandatory will only result in a situation of sending those operators back into the underground channel of working, rather than you knowing where they are. You wouldn't even know where they are, but they will operate. Because people who find a commercial use for a product will find a way of using it, and they will use it. Whether you know it or you don't know it is quite immaterial to them. And that's, I think, the reason why we have 6 lakh drones here in the first place. And most of the Chinese drones that are there in the 6 lakh are all using mobile-based sensors, mobile sensors that have come from the mobile industry, that have come from the computing industry. So I think they're two different cups of tea, which the aircraft and the fighters and the larger aircraft require their own set of, regulations and certifications, and the smaller drone sector need their own set of rules. So I would say that, they are not comparative. Let's look at it as two different things. And one of the issues in the delay in the regulation has been the fact that we've been trying to apply rules of large aircraft to small drones, which really doesn't work.
Mr. Sai, could you wind up, please?
Considering that, so I've wound it up. Now, the last and the, one point which Gusty mentioned about was that, the attack capabilities for anti-drone, I think, need to be it needs to be attack, and it needs to be the small disposable kind, which could be even throw and use with a small explosive element. And that could possibly be the way of tackling some of the anti-drone related issues. So with that, I conclude. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Sai. And what I can see is we have the technology, and most importantly, what you brought out was the rules that there are, which are, which the DGCA has brought out and the government has brought out. It allows development for defense within our country itself. I think you were talking of in the realm of not allowed to purchase drones from outside, and not for the defense. Instead, manufacture it within the country.
Absolutely.
So which is a tremendous boost to private industry development and competition within our country. Now, yes. Now I will go to Abhishek. And Abhishek, I know we have covered a lot of things, and you're in the end of the thing, but perhaps you could touch on the Chinese competition, and as well as the AI and the autonomous systems, I think, which was not covered as much. Maybe you can touch upon that. You're the expert in that. Over to you, Abhishek.
Thank you very much, sir, and thank you very much for the opportunity. So first is that I have been introduced as a CFD man, which I am, but my company does a lot of work, like, for example, making guidance codes for anti-ballistic missiles also, which is the most complicated maths and physics that happens to be there. So there is a wide range of experience that we have, and we have been working in this field for 17 years. I think we were the first defense startup in the country which came out of any IIT. So a lot of experience also I have in terms of how this ecosystem works. And I think a part of the agenda that I have today is because there are a lot many youngsters here. I would like to help them to come up and work in defense. That would be good for everybody. So that is that. And I think I'm intelligent. I did not make a very technical presentation because I knew that everything would be said by the time I get the chance. So, and I'll just start the presentation. So 5 minutes it is, sir?
Yeah.
I'll just start.
Yeah, Abhishek, 5 minutes is no problem. Please go ahead.
Yes, sir. You can see my screen, sir?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I'll start the timer, because I know that many of you have to go for dinner. I am follow Jain principles, so I have already taken my dinner at 5 o'clock. So there are three things that I wanted to cover. One was the threats, something about operations, and the national capabilities. And one question that Soundar Rajan sir had posed, that we do not have those codes because they are very difficult to write. I think for that I would have some answer. So as usual, first slide is always an anecdote that I want to tell, because that is the only thing people remember when they go back home. So this is about a legendary Professor Yashpal, who people who are old enough like me, they would know. He used to host a program called Turning Point in Doordarshan. It was a very nice program. So one day a young boy asked him, "Sir, I am not so intelligent as you. If I could get a brain transplant and I could get your brain, I would like young and also intelligent." So the professor replied, first thing was that, "My boy, this is technologically very, very difficult. I mean, it's not possible. There are so many neurons and billions of connections. How do you do that?" But the second thing that we said was, "Good. Even if it is possible, it is not you who would get a younger body, but it is me who would get a younger body. I mean, you will not get a younger brain, but intelligent brain, but I will get a younger body. So what I wish to say from this is, this anecdote is, and for every young person listening, that in the drone, the most important thing is not this fuselage. This people can make now on 3D print. What is important is the electronics behind it, the autopilot, and the source code of that autopilot. If you do not own the source code, you cannot change the mission at your will. You are dependent on somebody else to change that mission. The threats to in the drone industry are, I mean, everybody says transporting weapons and drugs, but I don't feel those are bigger threats. The bigger threats are jugaad, laziness, lack of vision, and obsolescence. Sir, what is happening is, so there are now so many drone companies in India, and everybody's assembling drones and somehow flying it. And with that, what is happening is, I had a meeting at DRDO headquarters, and there was a drone, some challenge was there, and people were confused who is saying correct and who is saying wrong. It has become a big problem in ascertaining who is technologically capable and who is not. And there is a lot of jugaad happening with the drones, which I think is not a good idea. And of course, obsolescence is happening because we have a slower decision-making process and the world moves forward. And of course, enemy capabilities are a big threat, but I think it is our own laziness and time consumption that is a bigger threat. They, of course, are, so this has been said, they are difficult to detect, etc. Now here also, I think there is a difference between ingenuity and jugaad. So for example, why we are now planning to spend a huge amount of money in radars and other stuff, can we not simply think of making a small drone like this, which flies at a height, and because it is only 50 grams, it gets sucked into some other bigger drone, which is carrying the payload. Simple solution. It just destroys a propeller, one or two, and that's a solution which would be cheaper. And then if it does not destroy, it lands. So we are not, we are only wasting electricity in that sense. So what is happening is that either we are in jugaad or we are in a big money spending mode. That ingenuity, I think, is something that we'll need to think about. We will need to, so I have said that again, but I like to repeat it. We'll have to work on firmware and autopilots of our own. We have no respite. So it took us 6 years and some 500,000 lines of code to come to this drone, which is now what I say, a modular drone. We even give this drone to students who can code their own things into our base platform. So I think that we cannot just do it overnight. We'll have to spend that much of time, and we'll have to cater for that time and funding. The miniaturized motors are another big things. All the drones that are flying on Chinese motors, and this is going to be a problem. And then of course there is battery and its development and optimization. Fortunately for propellers, I am a Rimmele certified engineer for design of propellers. Propellers are something which are doable in much lesser time, but and what has also happened is, I think we are not focusing on the base technologies, and we are carried away by the glamour of swarm or drones which are carrying missiles. A missile carrying drone is much farther away. First, we have to make a drone which can carry a simple 250 or 400 gram grenade. I mean, so we have to go step by step. We cannot be firing bullets or anti-tank missiles from the drones if we do not have our own firmwares and autopilots and our own design. And of course, I think before we go on to these kind of swarming or missile firing drones or predators and things like that, I think loitering munitions or kamikaze drones are easier to do than the ones which we are currently talking about. So I think that is important. And in national capabilities, the last slide, I think there are some cons and there are some pros that that are there. So one is that there is a lot of capability in the country, but very scattered. So there is a company in IIT which is doing very good CMOS sensors. I am doing something which is on nano drones, first company in the country to do with own autopilot. Somebody is doing something else, but we are not working together. Can their CMOS sensor, my drone, and somebody else's explosive come together? We are always worried about who would get the cake more, and we don't get any cake whatsoever. So That's a problem. We don't have a long-term vision, and I support the idea that there should be a drone command, and there should also have a long-term vision of how to support development of our own drones. So like there is Army Design Bureau, I think there should be a drone design bureau in the Air Force and then AI and ML are most abused words. This is a big problem in our country. You talk to anybody, a banking employee also, he says, I am now using AI and ML. But what basically he's doing is running somebody else's code and producing some result which he does not understand. You ask him, what is the kind of algorithm you use to make that? And he's completely blank. So I think with AI and ML also, we'll have to do the math ourselves. We need to write those partial differential or whatever equations that are required, or know the algorithm at the base. Then only we'll be able to cull out the algorithm that we want and burn it on a chip. We cannot burn the entire TensorFlow from Google on the chip. But there is a pro also. There is a lot of enthusiastic manpower. I meet people because now I have become chairman of FICCI Defense Technology Task Force, and some people, like really brilliant people, just that they do not have the guidance of people to have focused effort on building something. Fortunately, there are a lot many schemes to fund this kind of enthusiastic manpower. So this problem of funding has been solved. So we need a national UAV roadmap, and I think we have missed a lot of buses in seekers, in IR seekers, and things like that. But UAV is a bus which is still there, and I think we should not miss it. And finally, I just wish to say, so this is a video which you can see, and you would see that it works just from the mobile, and you can just leave it and it understands that I have been thrown and it flies. It flies at very constricted spaces, but this is what you can see. What I wish to say is, we in SIDM are now starting a startup forum, and I think there are a lot many intelligent and enthusiastic young entrepreneurs in this audience. It is our duty who have been in industry for 10 plus years or 15 plus years to help them realize their dream. And I would also request them collaborate with people. Just collaborate and let us work together. And I think we all should be willing to help you, and we would be there to help you. Thank you. And these are my contact details if somebody wishes to write to me. Thank you, sir.
Excellent, Abhishek. That's really nice, and especially for the young audience and entrepreneurs, this is a fantastic input that you have given us. I'll come to you later. Let us get on with, we only talked of miniature drones and small drones. What about the large drones like the Searcher? We are talking of the Searcher and the Heron, and that keeps flying for 3 to 4 days and loiters over an area with an eye that does not blink. So what about them? Maybe the professor can take on. The larger drones that we need to make. See, we are buying the Predator. The Navy has bought another one, and we are continuing to buy such drones. Soundar.
You have to unmute yourself.
Correct. So that's a good question, and basically this is why I started. Of course, Sai brought out that there are two approaches. One, you look from the aircraft angle, and the second thing is you go from the RC tie and go up. These meetings should be there for medium, small, and large drones. So when we talk about large drones, we take the aircraft approach. This is what at least what DRDO has been doing. I wouldn't say DRDO was met with fantastic success, but since there is so much of expertise available in the country from industry now, we can definitely make it happen. But then we'll have to take an approach exactly like designing an aircraft as a drone. In fact, many of the new things are optionally manned aircraft. In fact, you can convert, for example, if you are not sure about MiG-27s, you're not unreliable, they're pretty unreliable, you make one-way drones out of it. The autopilot works beautifully. We have seen pilots ejecting the aircraft landing in Pakistan afterwards. We have seen that. Such wonderful autopilots. All we have to do is put this little bit of avionics, maybe not this costly, but somewhere to meet the one-way missions we can do. But on the other hand, we are looking at searchers, etc. It's very eminently doable in the country with the existing technology, and I'm quite sure the private industry can participate. The main issue was, of course, the certification is an issue. From the beginning, we have been looking at UAVs as not a big issue on certification. The manned aircraft program was always given phenomenal preference, and so of course, when you want to make it high reliability and good certification, you make it heavier and costlier. But these UAVs can be made with lesser, with all the, and we have been following mill standards all the time done by somebody else across the world. We can now form our own. We know what exactly works now, what is the redundancy required, what is the structural margin that we have to give. We can definitely use this. And all these technologies are available with us. Data link, secure data link technology, flight control technology, navigation, and the new things that we are going to look at is smart sensors, especially in the things like radars and also EOIR. Once these two, the DRDO lost out to searcher, etc., only because of the sensors. They are fantastic sensors, EOIR sensors, SAR sensors, and so we lost it out to them because the user found much more use with them than this, and we had to go back to them for importing those. So a parallel effort is going on in the country, in the labs, for developing these sensors, and hence we will be able to make this. So it's a very important thing to start from the top also. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. A little bit, Abhishek Jain, you mentioned about the national UAV roadmap and the funding. What lines are you thinking?
Okay, sir. So there are few things that I'm thinking. For example, motor development still is a problem, and most of the UAVs fly on motors, the smaller ones. Now, the previous question that you asked was, why can't we make a Heron or Herop? Again, we have not invested in the R&D of those small IC engines which can power the drones for so much of time. They finally have to get power from somewhere. So I think this is one area that there we can invest. And of course, this is not that it will only benefit the drone industry. Motors are now used everywhere. So it would be cross-funded from many agencies. So that is one. Second, of course, I'm a big votary of that the brain from the drone has to be ours. So for example, my drone, I think Varun asked me, what is the indigenous content? Excepting the battery and sometimes the motor, everything else is Indian. And the entire autopilot is Indian, which is what we charge for when we sell it on Amazon. We have sold 8,000, by the way. So if the brain is ours, other things we can manage. So we'll have to invest in the brain, and there is no two ways about it.
Is there a problem in buying motors off the shelf worldwide?
Sometimes there may be when they are very high performance motors. Reasonable local motors you get, but then you need high performance when you do defense systems. That is an issue.
Right.
Sai wants to.
Mr. Sai, you wanted to say. You unmute, please.
Yeah, just adding to the point, of what Abhishek mentioned. Now, as I said earlier, we made our own autopilot, and we have our own autopilot, which we use with our own patented technology. And we've used it not only for drones, we've used it even for UGVs as well as for boats, and as well as for tractors and various other places. But I'm coming to the question now of motors. Now, I think there needs to be, as Abhishek rightly said, that the battery, the motors are something that we need to look at making in India. But I think from an overall perspective today, I think following the what the Ministry of Electronics has done in terms of indigenization of make in India for phones, make in India for laptops, make in India for the consumer durables, and these kind of products, they have been having these, the incentive schemes for making it in India, and they have been, they've been adding duties to those products that come in as full systems. Now, there, one of the biggest advantages and one of the drone industry is and will be a beneficiary of those schemes is the fact that the electronic supply chain has shifted from complete system to component level. And that's the reason today why you're able to get sensors, you're able to get processors, you're able to get chips at fairly low cost as compared to what it would be if you were to sit and import each one of those. So I think over a period of time, this will evolve as the industry evolves, that from systems, it will shift to components, from components, it will shift to, raw materials. But the supply chain has to shift based on the demand that it comes in from the industry. So there has to be an industry to be able to absorb the supply chain as it shifts. So I think one of the key factors is building national capabilities and building the industry, and then automatically the rest of the things will fall into place.
Thank you, Mr. Sai.
Suresh?
Suresh, yes, sir, Suresh, you will turn.
Sir, yeah, two quick points. One is regarding this. It's all very fine when you import components and things like that. One of the major issues as a user, you please take it on board, and probably Augustine and David will vouch for it, is product support later. It's all very fine inducting systems, but be it a sensor, be it a motor, be it a Rotax engine, whatever you want to call it, product support is a big issue as far as our ecosystem is concerned. Another point I just wanted to ask is, Professor Soundarajan and Abhishek have come out with very, very valid points. And that is what actually makes us users a little apprehensive about most things. One point regarding, sir, Vartha, you asked about the UAVs, large size, let us say Predators, Global Hawks. We have actually used it only in benign environments. Whatever. I mean, it looks very nice on videos and it goes and hits a target and all that. But what is the counter? I mean, was it a hostile environment in which it was used? We have lost. India has lost, IAF has lost, Army has lost UAVs in a hostile environment. So frankly, what are we really talking about? So there is where we come to actually the point of Professor Soundarajan brought. It's a one-way, and Abhishek also mentioned about it. It is better to actually invest in one-way systems. One-way systems, I'll repeat, survivability, range, precision, effect. This is what I really require as a user, and to my choice. And that is where I can make a huge difference. If you want to talk about Balakot, what Bhatta sir talked about, or any other thing. Today, space, we have LEOs. China is far ahead. Revisit times are just about 19 minutes or 17 minutes. But we don't have that kind of a capability. But we still can, tackle targets and give a message. And offense is good. But the major problem is we cannot pinpoint who the author of a particular attack is. So be it Mumbai or be it even Jammu. Frankly, we don't know. There's nothing left. So these are the issues actually we need to tackle with. That's all I want to say.
Absolutely. I think Vartha, I just raise one point. I think what Suresh pointed out is in the context of ISR and space issues. Just for everybody's information, China has 120 satellites dedicated to ISR alone as of today. They are next to the US in terms of total number of satellites, close to 400 now. But the more important point with respect to Abhishek and Sai is what I'm bringing out is extremely important that you pointed out that we have complete control on the brains but into the brains, the chips is the most important. Today, the battle between US and China is a technology battle. And the Americans are tightening the screws on Chinese now because the semiconductor chips dependency of Chinese on the American and European majors is 80%. And therefore, they're made in China 2025, and their target lines for 2030-35 is to increase that to 60%. They're trying like hell. But this is the trump card with the Americans and the Europeans. And where is our dependency on the chips? We are completely dependent on imported chips. And what are we doing about it?
I understand that manufacturing of the chip it requires a very huge investment. Besides, of course, the raw, what do they call, the rare earth minerals. But aren't we importing it from Taiwan? It's supposed to be one of
mainly Taiwan, sir.
Mainly Taiwan.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, but we need to work on our own research and our own capabilities. That's what Sai wants to say.
Talking about the chip factor, we have, as I said, we made our autopilot way back in 2014-15, and from which we have made derivative technologies in GPS tracking and other areas. And one of the major challenges that we have faced as a company is that Indian private equity does not fund manufacturing. It does not fund, it does not fund anything that does not convert into an app and revenue within 6 months.
Very true.
This is a hard fact of life. We got funded by the TIFAC Department of Science and Technology, and that's how we were able to make that autopilot in the first place. And then subsequently getting funds to expand further was practically impossible because everybody considers manufacturing to be a too long a haul. And when an investor compares it with an app which rolls out within 15 days and starts making him money, he doesn't want to put money into this. So the challenge today is that we agree that chips have to be there, but chips can, as I said, the supply chain has to move from systems to components, components to raw material. So the chip comes into the raw material level. And the raw material level, unless you have volumes, you cannot fund. Sir, you're talking about chips. People are not even willing to fund organizations that make system on modules using chips. That is a challenge. Now, system on module, then system on chip, and then chip, then the silicon wafer. This is the process that it follows. Now, who's going to, help somebody to bridge this gap? Today, today with the autopilot, we can go into a silicon wafer. But who's going to fund the cost to get into the silicon wafer, and who's going to buy that today, to go forward? So these are commercial aspects that definitely need to be addressed. It is something that should be there on the radar of, the policymakers. But I think there should also be a part that says that, okay, this sort of activity would be funded in this way.
That's right.
Thank you. We are completely run out of time, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, we are almost half an hour beyond time, and I can see that Groupie Vijay Kumar is frowning there. What I could suggest, I think Groupie Vijay Kumar can talk about it, that the questions can come to you, and perhaps in what are there in the chat box, you can get the answers and respond to them. It's been my privilege to chair this meeting, and I learned a lot, and I see I'm confident of our future. We have the best brains going around. Maybe a visionary leadership is enough to channelize all this towards a weapon and as well as a useful product. Over to you, Vijay, for the word of thanks.
Thank you, Marshal. It's really a privilege to listen to such a brilliant insights, and we have over 1,100 viewers watching this program from all over YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all the channels, and the number of questions have come. Most of the questions have been answered during your discussion. One question which is commonly multiple people replied is how the drone is going to help in civil as well as the business applications with the new policy which is coming in force, and how are we going to implement it, keeping in mind the national strategy, security, as well as the business opportunity, because the huge amounts are invested by the businesses in terms of some of their thing. And one person also replied in terms of chips. I think yesterday or day before yesterday, the Tata's chairman is come up in a big way to invest a huge amount in chips manufacturing in India. So things are happening. And as you said, long way to go ahead. And thanks to each one of you, sir, for joining us this evening. And especially thanks to Mr. Peter Rimmele for joining us from Germany and stayed all through to listen to us. And thanks, Air Marshal Matheswaran, for facilitating this session. It's a brilliant, outstanding. I think we need a full day conclave. I'll assure you, when the things really improve, we'll organize a full day conclave at the Indian Management Center. Yes, so that the think tank can really think, and we'll also get the corporate investors to come and address our concern, why they are not able to come forward and do that. And thank you, Professor Soundar Rajan, Marshal Varthaman, sir. As usual, you have been brilliant and bringing the best into the panelists. That's very, very important. Abhishek Singh, excellent. We'll try to get you over to speak more about the opportunity, what you really mentioned. Marshal Suresh, sir, thank you so much. And Mr. Sai Pattabhiraman and Captain Augustine Vinod, and also Captain David Devasagayam. It's a bouquet of brilliant mind in the field, which shared so much of interesting insights, which I'm quite sure only 1,100 people watched live, and over a couple of thousand, over 10,000-15,000 people watch in YouTube over the next few days. Thanks so much. I apologize to all the viewers who sent so many questions. Unfortunately, I thought one way sharing the knowledge is very, very important. Yes, question can be addressed. As Marshal Varthaman said, you send it to us. We'll be more than happy to pass it on to the respective speakers, and their response will be shared with you. Thanks so much. Thank you also, Pankaj, for facilitating this to do this.
Sir,
and
I think Mr.
Thanks.
Peter wishes to speak something. I think.
Please go ahead, sir. Peter?
Mr. Peter.
Yes.
Peter, you want to say something?
I was asked before to clarify a misunderstanding, and I'll do. Germany has not abolished the drones as it may have appeared. What happened is that the DHL, what is a daughter company of the German Postal Services, has, let's use the word, abolished its program of developing a drone for delivering packets. They have tested it between North Sea Island and the continental part of Germany. They have tested it similar like the Uganda sample was mentioned for delivering medicines in Tanzania, but they have now abolished that program. Of course, the sky is full of drones, not in the moment when I'm looking, but otherwise it is. And there, of course, is a need for regulating it the more you have. So up to 5 kilos, you can buy it free, no problem. 5 to 25 kilos, you need a permission. Above 25 kilos, it is not permitted. So that is basically the framework, and then that will apply to all of Europe because the EU is regulating that. And this is the civilian use. So of course, it doesn't say anything about military drones in all things. So as a result, Germany is not abolishing the drones. It is just, as far as the civilian sector is concerned, trying to regulate the usage and in which areas you can fly them and where not, and so on. But a crowded area like some big cities in India, that need is there too. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, for the clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peter, and thanks to Chief Marshal Anugraha. Sir, your presence has added tremendous value to the program. We are indeed grateful to you. You got any comment? You want to ask any questions, sir? Air Chief?
No, I'm very glad that I've attended this session with you all. Very nice to see my seniors and colleagues there on this panel. I think very beautiful discussion and very relevant. I'm sure there's a lot to learn from this, and maybe the policymakers could be influenced. Maybe the service headquarters should take it up. Thank you. Thank you very much. All the best.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. As a token of our appreciation, this is what we do when we are separated by the pandemic. On your behalf, MMA and all of us, the Peninsula Foundation, Konrad, would like to present 1,000 masks to the people, all the people, and we also give and we also do that. We go around the people in Chennai, especially area which really requires. We do vaccination. We give a lot of stuff what we give to the people who are not able to get the job done, and also we teach them and make sure that everybody wears the mask. Still 100% vaccination is done, we could do, and the area surrounding our area we really could vaccinate almost 100%. We continue to do that. Thanks so much. I thought in a small way we can contribute ourselves to making sure that our people, not only us, people around us, live peacefully. Thanks to each one of you. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we look forward to seeing you soon at MMA and its activities. Bye-bye. Good night. And
thank you, Vijay. Professor, thank you. Sue, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Peter, thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, sir.
And Gusty, Sai, Abhishek, and Soundar, thank you so much for being there today.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Varun sir, thank you for being here. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you, Air Marshal Matheswaran, for giving us a chance to talk. It was very interesting. And as you rightly pointed out, let's have a conclave.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I'm all in for it, sir.
Great. Thank
We'll
you.
plan that. We'll plan that. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good day, sir.